man, I just recently downloaded TikTok on my phone. I'm not really into like TikTok and all of that, man. But man, it's crazy to see how many people, man, they have this tainted view of God, bro. They think God is evil. And you know what people do? They go get scriptures out of the Bible and say, look, this is what God said. I'm evil. And this is what I do. This is evil. And I always clap back though. I'm like, so what difference does it really make if it's evil or not? It's still God. That's the bottom line. It don't matter. Whatever you think or whatever you say, it's still God. So if you want to think God is evil, just know it's a God. As long as we can agree that it's a God. Hey. Yeah. So I need to let you hear some of these sometimes.
Yeah, I just stay off of it because.
I get in it because I like to listen to see people's point of view and like.
Yeah, no, I don't mind listening to people's point of view and stuff. But here's what I've come to terms with. This is the same struggle man's had since the beginning of time. This is just now being televised because. I mean, you have to go back and think about it. Like in the Garden of Eden, what was the fruit that they ate?
Good and evil.
The knowledge of good and evil.
Right.
And why do you think God held them back from doing?
Well, yeah,
eating from the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. Because you have to be perfect and fully balanced to really understand good and evil. And none of us are ever that way. We all have biases and things like that. Like it's easy. Like I think it's always careful on how you unpack that subject, because what people see as evil is there's evil in the world. But what people sometimes tie into evil is they tie it into God, and God had overall control of everything, but in that control he let us have control. So there's that piece, and
it's
then
the free will, right?
Well, that's the free will of it, but then the second piece is that in that man has corrupted things. Like you have to be very careful on it, because the thing is, like, if you say God doesn't have any control of it, then they're going to say God's not in control. But God has so much control that he allowed to release control. And that's the whole point of his sovereignty and his allowance of it. And when you try to explain something like that to even ourselves, we're going to struggle with it.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But that's why it's always, you got to, look, the way I look at it is, if someone really wants to find God, he's going to be there. And if they really go and talk to him and question him and all this stuff, they're going to see who God is, because you'll see his, like, one of the more recent things I've heard, and I actually like this, is this girl was talking on the podcast about how she read the whole Bible and she struggled with it. And she went to her pastor and said, I read all of this and I thought it was going to come out like with some kind of profound thing. And the pastor told her, it's because you're reading the Bible to find yourself.
Right.
And the Bible is not meant for you to find yourself. It's meant for you to find God and learn about who God is. He was like, go back and reread it and go and see for God's characters. You see, a lot of times we read it and we're trying to put ourselves into the roles of David.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Which there's nothing wrong with that either, but you got to understand God's character. And when you look at that, then you start changing some of the things that come to the understanding. Like, you can't ask God to be in the middle of some things and then to be out of other things. And so in his sovereignty, he lets things, he stands back sometimes and allow things to happen. And most of the time it's by human corruption. It's like almost saying like God.
It's all the time by human corruption.
It's almost like saying God caused Cain to kill Abel.
Right.
God didn't cause Cain to kill Abel. God had certain things but Cain reacted in a certain way. And that's the same thing with us and our reaction. The only reason I stay away from, because typically
I don't.
I know. But for me, I just think you're not going to convince most people.
Yeah.
Because most people, when they're, especially if you're creating something, you've already had your mind set. There's very few people who are coming in with open mind. And typically, you have to be at a place where I think what I found is God brings people to you who are already at that point ready to receive that. And you'll see that. Like one of the ones that's actually been pretty interesting, if you go if you ever get a chance to go watch his more recent like podcast and where he's been on, is Russell Brand. He's that British comedian actor. Like the guy was wild out on psychedelics like crazy, studied every Eastern religion, like complete almost like atheism, and then one day just has a complete turnaround.
That revelation, boy.
And
it's that revelation.
And now he just talks about God. And
it's that revelation, boy.
You see that a whole difference in him, and like, and he talks about it too. I can't remember. I was listening to him say something. And I don't remember if he was referencing one of Paul's scriptures or something, but he was referencing something about like when it was the right timing, God opened his mind up to everything that he had seen in the Bible and knew, and he understood grace and the understanding of the relationship with God. Still very imperfect, but that's what I mean. Like, and not saying people shouldn't evangelize and stuff like that, but it's like you also got to understand like sometimes you're not gonna change their mind there, but like,
see, that's the thing though.
Hundreds of people.
I don't get on there to change people's mind. I just get on there to make people think.
Yeah,
that's
but
all.
But are they actually gonna think?
So, I mean, hey, that's up to them.
I don't know.
I mean, I'm gonna say my piece, and let it be done. And I'm always respectful. I say, hey, you know what? I can respectfully agree to disagree with that. And you know what? You believe what you want to believe, and I believe what I want to believe. Yeah. And you know what? I guess at the end of the day, we'll see.
I mean, that's cool. I mean, I
don't go in there to debate people. I just go in there to question people, because a lot of times people take scriptures out of context.
Yeah.
They'll take one scripture out of the context and then try to apply that. I mean, even us as Christians, we do it sometimes. Yeah. We take one scripture and then we try. But in reality, what we should be doing is we should be reading the whole chapter, reading the whole, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And not only that, you got to allow the Holy Spirit to.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Interpret it to you what the Bible means.
Mm-hmm.
Most people, when they read the Bible, they read it like any other book. And
just like you were saying with the lady.
With a human mind, so they're going to interpret it different ways, Paul said that was it Paul that said that some plant the seed, some water it, and then some will reap it.
Yeah,
and our job is to we don't know when we're planting, we don't know when we're watering, and we don't know when we're sowing it.
That's right.
But I learned that a long time ago when I saw, I think it was 2020, that show, or 60 Minutes, one of those. They had 10 non-denominational pastors on that show, and they were talking about how to get to heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I heard non-denominational, I thought all of them were going to say through Christ.
Yeah, through Christ, right.
And I was surprised how I think only one or two said it was only through Christ. And about 8 of them had other ways to get into heaven. And the Bible just tells you, how you're going to get to heaven.
Yeah.
But because everybody was, but that's why we have so many denominations, so many religions and all that, because, we start disagreeing on things. We don't like, things. So, you know what? Let's start our own denomination, our own church or whatever, One thing I learned through all the years I've been as a pastor, we're all extremists.
You got that
we're
right.
gonna go one way or the other.
Yeah, you're right.
And it's hard to balance out what God wants us to do, until God comes and shows you, that's in control.
No, it's okay now?
Yeah, go ahead now. Now you can talk.
Welcome to the No Name Podcast. We don't have an episode number, but hey.
It's an episode. No, but what I was going to say is, I don't know. I think you got to find the right space where like everyone's a little different. Like again, like, and that's what I mean. Like to me, like I don't do the TikTok thing or anything like that.
Yeah.
Cause that's not where the Lord's led me. Like I'm honestly, to me, like sometimes I walk by and if I hear, you can tell when someone's making a point and arguing something, and it doesn't matter what you say, it's not gonna change their mind. Like, and that's both Christians and non-Christians. Like I've met Christians in my life who will, and I'm just like, okay, well, I'm not gonna convince you, and I'm not trying to convince you. But I always think there's different platforms, and it's just a matter of like what's actually. Like you have to figure out what the purpose and what the Lord's leading to you towards. Like there's this one guy that I like. At first I was like, okay, what is he doing? And he's an older white guy, and you could tell he's studied. He's done this for a long time. I can't remember.
Does he go on college campuses?
Yeah, that guy. But when
about that life.
But when you listen to him, he's not debating. He's actually going there and wanting people to ask the question so he can. He tries to diffuse a lot of the arguments and really is trying to have a conversation with people that want to have that conversation. And so I see that's where the Lord had led him. Like for me, I'd rather do that on a one-on-one basis if someone wants to talk about that. Because just the same way, like if I have questions, I'm going to go and I'm going to seek certain people and I'm going to say, okay, here's my thoughts on this. And some of it doesn't have to do with biblical foundations. There's secondary things like, oh, my thoughts on how this could have happened or why did this happen? Or here's my thoughts on what I think of the Garden of Eden. But it's not foundational, salvational issues.
Right.
And I'll have those conversations. But I'm very... Just because that's not the way I felt like the Lord led me to be in it. Like, I also don't feel like I was ever called to be a street corner preacher. There's people that like to do that.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes I think
I've watched those too.
So you get every different like and it takes a while. Like I found that where the Lord has placed me in certain areas. Like I found like. At times, the Lord has made me more of a preacher, and at times, He's made me more of a teacher. At certain times, and I've understood that it fluctuates. Like I think in this season of my life, I'm more of a preacher right now than a teacher. Like because I'm moving around, I'm traveling around a lot. Like to be a teacher, you got to be consistent. You got to be there. I'm more into the preaching and the background staff work and stuff like that, and I'm okay with that. Like it's for me, some people need 30 hours to put a sermon together. And for me, I'm just constantly thinking of stuff. And it's like, it just takes me.
Yeah. I guess it's different for different people. Yeah.
But that's what I mean. But then you start finding where the Lord uses your talents in those areas. The problem is a lot of times we put roles on people and we say, okay, you're a Christian, so you all got to go evangelize. You all got to evangelize this way, or you all got to do this, or you're a pastor, you all got to do it this way.
It don't work like that though.
And you find that you got to use the gifts the Lord gave you in the manner that He's given you. The Lord didn't give me a gift of singing, so the hell if I'm gonna get up there and sing, like I'll sing to Him, but I got you. My mic goes on mute and I'm gonna sing.
When I was a young preacher or Christian, I used to like to debate. I've always been a fighter. I've always liked to fight.
So you like to debate people?
Yeah, even though I didn't win 90% of my fights, but I like to fight.
Hey, and you in the fight.
I used to like to look, and I would go and look for them, the Jehovah Witness and all this. But then as time grew by, I started noticing the people around when we were debating. Some of them were newborn Christians. And I knew I wasn't going to change his mind and he wasn't going to change my mind, but we're going to have a good battle. But I started noticing that it was affecting the new people, you see, of what we were saying. Me and him, we're going to go our separate way, and our foundations were strong in the Lord, and his foundation was strong in, in his idiotic thinking. I said it nicely. So
welcome back, people.
But then that's when I started learning that, what, it wasn't benefiting nobody, my battles. So my job started to concentrate more on the ones that wanted to learn about the Word of God.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's been a long time I haven't gone to churches to preach, but when I would go to churches and all that, in Christian churches, they would invite me to seminars or just to preach and all that. They ran their churches or, you know, their organizations different than what I believe in, all that. There were things that I didn't believe and all that. But I've always respected them. One thing I always would go, when I would go there, I said, look, I know I'm the pastor. I know I came here and I'm the guest, but I'm under you. Whatever you tell me, what I can do and not do, that's what I'm going to do.
Respect.
Because this is your church, you know. Because I knew other guys that we would go and, you know, they would start, they're around. And they would try to correct them. You know, even when we would go to prisons, I would tell the chaplains, look, chaplain, I'm under you. What you tell me I can do, that's what I'm going to do. What you tell me I can't do, I'm not going to do. I'm not going to, you know, disobey what you know, even though I might not like it, but for whatever reason, you're in charge here, you know. And I remember I took this one guy once, and we were there, and the chaplain told us what to do. And when the chaplain left, he started saying, "No, but don't listen to him and this and that." I said, "Look, listen, because we're not going to get invited no more." No, he doesn't know what to do and all that, you know. And so yeah, he did his own thing and all that, you know. And then he asked the chaplain, "When can we come back?" I'll give you a call. You know.
No, that's not happening.
And I learned one thing, you know, how can I say it not to sound racist?
Just don't say it.
No.
I know what you're gonna say.
What?
Because you told this story. I know what you're gonna say.
Oh, okay.
But it's more.
You know.
It's not really.
Right. It's not about the race, but you know.
No, I know.
They don't like confrontation. You know, they won't fight. You know, like us Mexicans and all that from the streets. We're used to fighting and all that, and he had the power to invite us and not invite us.
Okay.
You see? And because the way he acted, ignore him, you know, he closed the doors on us. It wasn't the devil. It wasn't the chaplain. It was this guy disobeying what the chaplain has said.
Yeah.
You know. And sometimes, you know, it's you know, like that. Like I have family members that they believe differently. And I've never been one to go and get up on the table and start preaching. I knew guys that would go. I knew this one guy. We would go in the bars. We would give the flyers. And this guy, the first thing he would do, go in and disconnect the jukebox. Now these guys, the drunks paid money to listen. Wow. And they get on the table.
That's pretty bold.
Yeah, he would get on the table and start, you know, coming down.
You asking for,
you know. And instead of them listening, you know what? They were cursing him out, getting mad and all that.
Of course, yeah, of course.
You know, because
that's expected though. I mean, what you expect gonna happen? You're going into a bar.
And I said, that ain't the way, you know. And like Christmas time and all that, what I would do, I would buy tamales. And I would go in there. And drunks always hungry. So I would give them a tamale. And they would listen. And I would give them a flyer. See? So I've always been a person that, you know what, I'm going to tell you
probably
about
more
Jesus,
effective.
but I'm not going to force Jesus on you. You know?
I think one of the things about,
you know, sometimes sometimes our life.
I just thought after the 5 stories you were done.
No, I got 6. I got 10 more.
Come on, man! You almost made me spit my coffee.
Man, you like old man telling stories. Let me tell you, back. I know you're held up. I know you're held up.
We haven't been on a podcast in almost a couple of months. So
I'm telling you,
let him have his glory, bro.
So these stories have been repeated in all the first 100 episodes. So just go back and watch them. You'll hear the same story.
And that's all right. Sometimes it needs to be repeated, so we listen.
Repetition works, right?
But you know, you see, go ahead. You made me lose my thought.
That wasn't me. That's age. Anyways, and so you guys know we're joking. Don't get. I know some of you gonna think we're being offensive. This is the way we joke.
I'm dead, bro.
No, but what I was gonna say is, I think that's one of the things. Is like in all of this is like, honestly, if people go searching for God, they're gonna find Him. because he's there. He's not hidden.
Of course.
I think a lot of times, like the people you're talking about on TikTok, they're not really searching for God. They're searching for a justification on the issue in their life, the thing that happened, or whatever the circumstance may be.
We know it's something
because
deeper.
but it's even with Christians themselves. Like if you look at Christians who, like a lot of times we're so scared to go and ask a question and sometimes bring even your doubts and things like that and allow God to address it. But when you do that, God gets to address it and deal with it. It's like, that's why like I started doing those, and also because I've been away, but doing those thoughts, those shorts that I've been doing. A lot of times those are my final thoughts, but I've gone through a process. Like when I was kind of, because we were talking about the book of Hosea, when I was thinking about it, like one of my things was like, okay, I was like, and I was talking to my mom about it. I was like, I don't know how God, God could tell him to go marry, a prostitute or a promiscuous woman, whichever way you want to do it. And she was like, well, he just told her. And I was like, I know that's the faith answer and the biblical answer and the church answer. But like my thought process had to go through, okay, when God tells them, he doesn't tell them who. And he already knew somebody. So it's almost like, to me, and again, the Bible only gives you so much information. You have to kind of fill in the blanks and figure it out. And sometimes the details are not important, but sometimes they are. And like what I struggled with is we always stand on the sanctity of marriage. And God being just and love, he could not stain marriage by going and telling him to go marry someone he didn't love, because that would backtrack against what he was saying. So somewhere he had to be in love with her, because if not, the whole thing of this is that he's supposed to be the example of God's love. And in order for him to be an example of God's love, he actually has to love this woman. So God may have told him to, but somewhere in it, he fell in love with her. And he fell in love in this way with her that's who he wanted. If not, the story becomes pointless. And God but that's what I mean. Like, I had to go and ask, like, as I'm reading it, because again, it all started with, I was thinking about something, and when I Googled it, it took me to Hosea, and I was like, what the hell? Why would it take me to Hosea for this? And so then I had to start digging more, and I started asking myself, like, I was like, there's no way I can speak about Hosea if I don't address this concern I have in the beginning. But that's what I mean, like, and even in asking those questions and being willing to push and say, it wasn't going to affect my relationship with God, but what I did find was it revealed something more that I hadn't seen. It revealed something more of his character and who he is.
Because everything God does is a teaching for us in our lives.
Okay.
Everything.
I could believe that.
It's up to us if we want to learn something from it.
Yeah.
It's like even marriage. People will say, well, God made marriage. In reality, do you know he didn't make marriage? He gave what man wanted.
I'm interested to hear where you're going with this. Okay.
Because remember, God made Adam.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then God asked for somebody.
Yeah.
When he started seeing the animals 2 and 2, and he said, Lord, why don't I have a partner?
Okay.
And that's where marriage came in. And then the reason I'm saying, because sometimes like
it only took me 10 years of talking about that for you to embrace it.
I can't say.
Man.
What I'm gonna say, you're gonna have to bleep about 20 words from the sentence I'm gonna say, and so they asked for it.
Yeah.
So now we think that everybody has to be married.
Yeah.
As a Christian, you need somebody.
Yeah.
When in reality, you need Christ.
Yeah.
Now, yes, we all want a partner. We all want somebody in our life. We don't want to be alone. But even Paul said, if you can abstain, it's better for you not to be married.
Yeah.
To be single. But if you can't,
which most of us fall into,
most of us can't.
Yeah.
And there's things in the Bible that God told us to do, and that's what I mean. everything that God does, it's a teaching thing for us.
Yeah.
It's up to us to learn.
So
No, you're right. You're right.
So that you're talking about, how in the story that you said about how God is asking this man to marry a promiscuous woman, and you're thinking like, and it just, I don't know why, but it brought me to the story about David and Bathsheba, and how he wanted that woman. I mean, but there's no backstory. I mean, when you think about it, I mean, he had to have been looking at this lady.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't
You know
the
what I'm
first. It
saying?
wasn't the first
You know
time
what I mean?
she showered outside.
You know what I mean?
It wasn't the first time
he had to be looking at this lady. Before that.
Yeah, but the Old Testament was a wild Christian relationship with God. Because man, look at Samson.
Yep.
Samson did a lot of foolish things, but God still kept on using him.
Yeah.
Well, here's the funny thing.
That's why I believe the Old Testament is made out of the Victory Chapel, because man,
I don't know. But this is why it's good. Like, and the reason I said that is because that's something we like when I started looking at stuff a little deeper and going into it. Like, that was one of the conversations we had about Adam and Eve, and and it takes you to step out of your comfort zone, because sometimes you're like, oh no, I've always been taught this. If I step out of my comfort zone, I start asking this question, where does it lead me to? But a lot of times it's not leading you to a place of disfaith. It's leading you to understand God more. But one of the things, like, I was hearing someone on another podcast, or on a short I was listening to, and she was talking about an example that a pastor had given, where she was struggling with understanding the Bible too, again. And the pastor basically told her, I don't know how many pages he grabbed, but he grabbed like a small chunk of the pages. And he's like, basically about these like 2 to 5 pages, this is the whole gospel right here of grace and God's love for us. It's like everything else in the Bible is stories and example of God chasing us. Even though we've made all these mistakes and stuff like that. And all the ones that we talked about, like when you look at it, that's the way. And it's funny, like you listen to today, like, and this has been going on a while, but there was I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago, maybe even more, they started this whole thing of what kind of learner are you? Are you an audio? Are you a visual? Do you need instructions? Like, they started this whole thing. I think God realized that we were all basically visual people who needed examples. And so when we blew it in the garden, ever since then, he's just been setting up examples of what it is to be in a relationship with him. And you start going down that route of seeing that. That's why it was a revelation, and it wasn't a revelation to the Israelites when Jesus summarized the gospel in two main scriptures. And 2 main commandments, in loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and loving your neighbor as yourself. Because most of them would have known that when you look at the 10 commandments, the first 5 address how we live with God, our relationship with God, and the second 5 are how we deal with each other. And so summarizing that would have been a revelation, but not complete. Would have been a revelation to them, but at the same time, it would have been common, and not common, but an understanding, because if they knew those things. And so you see kind of that kind of growth.
I mean, it's like this. I can't remember if it was Noah or Lot. Remember when he got drunk? And
it was Noah.
It was Noah who got drunk.
2 of his sons went, and they covered him. They didn't want to see him. But another son wanted to see him, the way he was acting and all that. And God came down on him. And because, again, that goes to God's grace. God's grace and mercy, when you ask him to forgive you, he does not see what you did wrong. Because he forgave you. Us humans, we always want to find out, and then we always want to criticize, and not forgive.
Oh, come on, man.
And that's why it's very important, you can learn everything about the Bible. Everything. Have all kinds of degrees and all, which there's nothing wrong with education, because I send all my kids to get educated, and I was going to say another word, but thank God I didn't. But, now you see, you made me forget.
If you're educated,
all that. But if you don't learn the grace of God and the love of God, all that is worth nothing.
You know, the other thing that comes from that story is that the wine made it through the flood.
Yeah, that's true. But I've never been a wino, so I don't know about that stuff.
I'm just saying,
but, it's
of all the things that survived, apparently the wine did.
Yeah, sometimes looking at the Bible, and I've always believed, and I still do, the Old Testament is a picture of the New Testament. And the Old Testament and the New Testament is a picture of what's going on now, But we always have to go back to the grace and the mercy and the love of God. That has to be our foundation. Everything else, you know what? It should come over, with that. Because if you don't have that, it's not.
Well, I think that's why the journey of Christianity, it's a journey. Like you're learning. That's why it's good to have these type of conversations. And I mean, again, now when you start going off the reservations on it was Jesus the ultimate sacrifice. Like if you're doing your foundation has to be there. There's foundational truths, but there's other things that, again, open our eyes to God's grace, mercy. Like not fully understanding everything in the Bible on why God did certain things doesn't change my faith.
Right.
Because there's certain things that I'm not going to get, and that's where faith comes in, and you have to trust, and you have to also understand God doesn't see things the way we see things. And that's why, again, the whole evil and good comes in, because, again, we're not able to fully understand.
We're not God.
Right. We're not fully able to understand the knowledge of good and evil. And I truly believe, and again, I still think, I know Adam and Eve were cursed to die, but again, they were still made out of dirt.
Yeah.
Right? Their soul was what's eternal, but they were made out of dirt.
Right.
I think at some point, whether it was shortened or whatever, because again, and I use the example that the Garden of Eden is like heaven, but I think once we have a glorified body, like when we're dead and it's our soul, and we have this glorified body, whatever it is, I think we describe it as a glorified body, but it's really just our soul.
Right.
And I believe at that point, the only thing the soul truly desires is God.
Yeah.
The body is what desires everything else. The sex, the food, the happiness, the joy.
That's why you think Jesus said, deny yourself and pick up your cross and follow me.
And I say that not to say that all those things are bad things. I'm not saying they're all bad things.
Right.
Like some of it was created by God, and it was blessed by God. But what I'm saying is it's our bodily flesh that desires those things. And so when we no longer have that, well, now we no longer have the biases to be able to understand good and evil, because now you're in a point where you no longer need that. And when you're completely full with God, which I think even on this earth, we can only get so much of the fullness of God. That's the whole point of making it to the next area. It is in that completeness allows all our bias, all our desires, all those things to go away. And now you can truly understand good and evil. Because you see, whenever we try to understand good and evil right now, it's very hard for us. And that's why
it's gonna be human understanding.
That's why when we read the Old Testament, we'll find a scripture and say, well, the Lord told them to go smite all these people.
Yeah,
and it's like,
exactly.
Okay, but we have no idea what the Lord saw versus what we're seeing, and it's easy for us to just say that.
And that's always my point, bro.
When I was a young Christian, I would see a lot of people say that they were struggling, with being poor and they didn't have for the bills and all that, right? Mm-hmm. And they would say, "Oh, that's being a good Christian."
What?
And as time went by, I realized, what? One, I didn't understand because I didn't know what a true father was. Mm-hmm. Because what I thought of a father wasn't a good thing. Mm-hmm. You see, the examples I saw in life of a father wasn't the father who is our heavenly Father. Mm-hmm. You see, and until I learning what fatherhood was, how God was our father, and the love He had, then I started understanding
Yeah.
that in reality, in reality, when you struggle and all that, because everybody struggles, Christian and non-Christians.
Correct.
You know, so if you pride yourself in being, I'm struggling because of God and I'm all this, and it's been years after years after years, there's something's
wrong. Yeah.
Because
really
one,
wrong.
you're giving a bad testimony of the love of God. You're saying that God is a bad father because he hasn't helped you out through all that time, you know. And through all my 30-something years, you know, we struggle, but you know what? God has always been through our struggles, you know. I was in housing, I was in food stamps, but you know what? God used those things, you know, until, you know, and with time, God started taking me out of all that, you know. And I learned that God is not against having good things. God is not against you having money. It's when they become your God.
Right.
Because that was one of the commandments. Do not put no other God before me.
It's actually pretty much the first commandment.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And you know, and you know, so you know, God is not. If you know, I've learned that God can give you. I can remember who I saw once at the convention center that said, he said, look, God can give you millions of dollars. God can give you the best in the world. But you have to ask yourself this. Can God trust you with
Right,
it?
exactly. Exactly.
No, it's
You know.
Yeah.
Because there's
Because
people
if he can't
that
trust
get
you
all
with
that
$10,
stuff, and instead of keep on trusting God, guess what?
Yeah.
They trust in the things
Yeah.
that they have.
Yep.
You know. And you know, and I've seen Christians that are billionaires, Christians that are millionaires, Christian, you know. And then I've seen Christians that struggle.
Yeah.
You know, we all have. But you know what? God always is there through everything.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing that you're saying right there is that as long as God is there, you know, what
You know.
is,
But you know,
a lot of times it's just bad financial decisions.
Yeah,
well,
God-
that's true.
That too,
Yeah.
yeah.
Look,
yeah.
God forgives you. That God doesn't always cure dumbness.
Yeah.
And no, I'm not
That's
trying to call.
true.
I'm
But-
not trying to
but-
call.
yeah,
But
but
it's just
yeah.
it's just.
No, you're right.
It's
No,
just
but yeah,
that,
you're right.
Like
among the Mexicans, I can't
And
speak
black
about
people
the,
too.
Yeah, okay.
And black, I'm gonna
I was
chime in
gonna
on
say
it.
that.
No, I'm gonna chime
you know.
in. I'm gonna chime in. Yeah.
They never taught us those things.
Nope.
You know, they taught us you have money, go ahead and spend it. You know,
Yep.
go crazy with it. And
Yes,
all
sir.
That. You know, nobody ever taught me about finances.
Yeah.
You know,
Can agree.
Nobody.
yeah.
You know.
Yep. No, you're right.
And you know, and through our life, I know that a lot of times when I've gotten into financial problems, it wasn't the devil, it wasn't God, it was my decisions.
But it's also not just with the finances. Like with
Yeah,
anything.
anything,
Like
yeah.
like God can forgive, but if you like doing like dangerous stuff, it doesn't mean you're not gonna die. Like if you like to go, you know, race your car, or
I'll
you
tell you,
like to
like,
go and do like daredevil stuff, like doesn't mean you're not saved. It's just sometimes like those are the situations we put ourselves in, and that's the balance of it. Now there's other circumstances too, like a lot of things play into this, and that's why, again, going down the question of death and why do some people die at certain times and others don't. It's always a hard answer because only God truly knows.
Yeah.
And with that, we've gone over, so we just wanted to bring something quick. We're still putting together the long-term plan of how we're going to be doing the podcast. We're trying to finish the podcast room. Keep sending topics. We'll keep doing shorts. We're going to be doing a Christmas and a New Year's Eve and a couple more episodes while I'm here in town.
Yeah.
And then we'll figure out how we're going to be doing it remotely. If you want to help us out, and not just with this, but a couple of things we're going to be doing in the church, like trying to live stream the services. We need volunteers to help out, whether you have a technical background or not. If you're willing to learn, you know, let us know. We're happy to teach people and help out, or even figure out ways, because we want to, one, bring the production for this more. We have ideas for other kind of shows or episodes that don't just include us, but include other people trying to figure things out. And then as well as live streaming the services. So that's kind of where we're going to head. We'll talk about that more in the future episodes. But if you want to help out, let us know. We always need good volunteers to help us out. And kind of, again, some of this stuff we learned along the way. So, but with that said, we'll be putting out some more episodes. Hit the like and subscribe button. And that's it.
That's it.